Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hopkins, and today I'm joined with somebody who I've gotten to know a lot better over the course of the last year, somebody I consider a friend now. Funny story about that, probably every night when my wife's like, "Who are you texting?" I'm like, "I'm texting the good doctor down there in Cuba." It's a really interesting response to my wife on who I'm texting late at night. But Dr. David Rhoiney, really excited to have you on the show and hear a little bit more about your story and be able to share that with our listeners. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you. I know we're working on a couple things together, so it's fun to have you on the show, and we might get into some of that here as we go. But first thing, even before we started the recording, we could have got it done faster, but let's start with my icebreaker, right, about food. So let's start right there. You've traveled a little bit, you've lived in different places, but where do you stand on food? What's your favorite food thing? And we can go into a little bit about your background there and where you stand on different chains too, right? The local Cali versus Texas.
Without a doubt, it is Mexican food, first, second, and third, and then we can talk cheeseburgers after that, specifically bacon cheeseburgers.
Yeah. So when you talk about Mexican food, do you have a go-to dish if you go to a Mexican restaurant that you're looking for?
So I love enchiladas, but not everyone makes them the same. So you really got to know where you're getting them from. If I can't get enchiladas, then I am going with fajitas. If I can't get fajitas, I'm going with tacos. Tacos are just a staple. And if I'm really feeling messy, I'm going with nachos.
Yeah. Well, we know some people that have some big debates there around, the nachos versus tacos. And, our good friend Tyrone's he's got the worst takes on food out there. So we'll just leave it on that.
At this point, he's just trolling everybody.
Yeah, it's not even a real thing anymore. Let's talk about burgers too. I mean, burgers are my go-to. It's my favorite thing. I eat them everywhere. And, I guess you'll have to weigh in on the Whataburger versus, our SoCal burger chain out there, which we don't even need to mention. Which one do you fall in?
Absolutely, no question. It is Whataburger every single time. In-N-Out doesn't even come close. And the amount of food that you get at Whataburger is just unparalleled.
Yeah. And how about Five Guys? You've obviously been around Five Guys too, right? Being on the East Coast for a bit. Where do you put them in all this?
It depends on if you're talking about a Cajun spicy type burger. I love spicy food, so Five Guys. If it's my preference, I'm going Whataburger, Five Guys, then In-N-Out.
Okay. There you go. Well, how about so right now where you are down there? So you're in Cuba right now, so our Wi-Fi is always different. But are burgers a big thing down there? Or what's the cuisine? What are you eating down there right now?
So I'm on base, and it's interesting. I cook, trying 99% of the time cook. But today I went to McDonald's. We do have a McDonald's down here on base. So I love Big Macs, and it's probably a bad thing that I love Big Macs so much. And I have no problem eating a Big Mac and some fries and getting a sweet tea. I don't drink soda, or pop as they call it in the Midwest. I don't drink pop. But Big Mac, fries, and some sweet tea is always a staple of mine.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, we don't get much McDonald's anymore. My wife's not a fan, but I never got big into Big Macs. I love the double quarter pounder with cheese there. That's my go-to. And I've talked many times too. I used to eat the nugget bucket religiously in college. So I don't know. I don't think they do the nugget bucket anymore, but you used to get those 50 nuggets. It was like $20 or whatever. And we'd go after practice and just get those and crush a bucket of nuggets, which is probably not the healthiest training food,
not at all.
But the calories were there. So we did get the calories in. So
yeah, that's like Chick-fil-A for me in college.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Chick-fil-A, still do. And and I will start. I will start calling you David, and I know I like calling you the doctor because you earned it. You put in the work, so you have that. Before we get into a little bit more kind of about you, I've been adding this question this year too, which is. Which leads into the person's story, and a lot of advisors use it, which you'll appreciate too, which is what was your first experience with money? And I know you and I have discussed this before, but you have people come from different areas on that, and you've got a different perspective, right? Kind of your first or early experiences with money.
So my experience with money is born out of trauma, right? And it's tough for a lot of people to really relate with that, but there are a lot of people in this country who relate with that. I didn't really understand what a checking account was outside of using a check to bounce to get cash, right? So just so we can eat. And because of that, I started off on the wrong foot and at the wrong level with money, right? I didn't have a great relationship because it was always a reactionary thing, not deliberate thing. And you never really planned things out. You just sort of had to survive. And there's a large portion of this country that has to live the same way, right? In the U.S., we're very privileged, and we forget that there are a lot of people in the world who are struggling with just having the daily necessities, food, water, shelter, right? The basic necessities that you need just to live a healthy life. And they struggle with that. And money is up there. Like for me, I struggled just knowing that we had some sort of financial security because we didn't. I remember going through and I thought it was completely normal to go out and sell food stamps to get actual cash so I can actually survive. So trauma is my experience.
Yeah. And, you've overcome a lot and you've succeeded in a lot of areas, even though I know you'll say you're not there yet. You haven't succeeded yet, but we'll get to that. But I guess a good thing is tell us a little bit about where you are today. I know it's a little different than some of my other ones, but I think where you are today is a really interesting piece. And then we'll actually go back and hear a little bit more about your story, right? So just tell us about, where you are today, what you're doing, a little bit about that, and then we'll go back to your story.
So I am currently an attending general surgeon in the United States Navy. And as a caveat, none of my words or my opinions, these are solely my opinions and not expressed and do not represent the views of the United States Navy. These are just my own thoughts. I am an attending surgeon. I've been an attending surgeon for a year. I graduated residency in 2019. And I am the sole general surgeon to the base down in Guantanamo Bay for the year. And then I'll be back in the States working for the residency faculty and being a staff physician over in Portsmouth, Virginia. It's an interesting scenario. It's a lot of responsibility, but that's where I am today. I run a blog, which is just on my own time, and I try and give out and use my life experience to help teach people financial lessons. I don't know if a lot of people even pay attention to it, but it's there. And then I work with, as you know, with you and Tyrone Ross to try and get a nonprofit off the ground where we can start providing financial education and make it readily available for those that need it.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that evolve, and we'll hit on that a little bit later. But it's we're moving on it finally, so it's exciting. Well, first of all, before I forget too, right, essentially thanks for your double service to the country, right? You're representing us in the Navy and also, right, as a medical professional. That's two double thanks there. So that's where you get to earn those Big Macs, right? You're allowed to eat them because you give them back so much. But so let's go back, David, and talk about, right, kind of your story. And I know you usually start like in your childhood because that is very formative to you, right? It's your experiences and your knowledge has kind of formed the way that you think and behave today. And your journey is unique, right? There's no one else with exactly your same experience out
Yeah, so I just like anybody else, you don't get to choose who your parents are. You don't get to choose what situation you were born into. The original situation I was born into wasn't the greatest, but we weren't uh, like super poor. When my biological father left my family, it completely destabilized my family to the point that we struggled with just making sure that we had a roof over our head, we had food in our mouths, and that we could just overall survive. My mom unfortunately passed in 2011, but she was bipolar, and with that, I mean, it came with some challenges, right? And so she switched jobs a lot. I'm probably underestimating. My brother and I probably moved about 30 times as a kid, up and down California, and we stayed in random people's house. We had to really sleep on a lot of couches, and we stayed with a lot of random people. I've lived in a homeless shelter. I've had to live in a car for 3 months, and living in a car was interesting because I can remember the dimensions of being in that back seat on the passenger side in that Volkswagen Jetta. And I remember having to eat Big Macs or not Big Macs, or Whoppers for every meal, right? Because there were two for $1 and we didn't have a lot of money. And for kids, you can split them in half, and there you go. There was our meals for the day. And we lived in a car which was broken down, and it was in a mall parking lot. So we just walk over to the Burger King, go get that, use the restroom in the Burger King, and really freshen up there. And I mean, for me, like, those things really shaped who I am, because it created this drive really to never go back there, right? To make sure my family's taken care of. And for me, when I meet my family, like, all I really have left and I really am close to is my brother, right? Because he had to go through that with me right there, and we had to push each other to survive. We went through a lot of trauma that we really had to dig down deep to make it through. Living in a homeless shelter is still visible to me, and I can still close my eyes and smell everything, and really understand like where we came from. I remember showing up to the homeless shelter with my mom, my brother, and that first night my mom slept against the door, making sure that, because the door didn't lock, right? And so my mom literally slept her back up against the door on the floor while me and my brother were in the bed. I mean, it's just little things like that. I mean, the next day we didn't have any clothes because the hotel that we were staying in, we couldn't pay, and they took everything from us. And so we were there waiting in the hall with everybody else, and they came and they threw all the clothes on the floor. And I remember just standing there like, I'm not picking clothes up off the floor. Like, and my mom looked at me and said, you can't be too proud to do that. And I remember saying to myself, I never want to be in this position ever again. So eventually my mom got us out of the homeless shelter by the grace of God, really, because what happened is that she got a voucher to get us an apartment, right? And it paid for our security deposit and got us off the ground for a couple months. And then they set her up with temp jobs. And my mom at one point was working 3 jobs just to pay the bills, right? And so that's not sustainable, right? And so she at one point was working at a Frito-Lay factory, and this is before they had like these automatic chip like pickers and stuff like that. She would have to pick the bad burned chips off the line, and so when she come home, I put cocoa butter on her hands because she have all these burns, right? So then my mom taught me really the how to work hard, right? And she used to always tell me, if you can't come home, look yourself in the mirror and say that you worked your hardest that day, then you failed. All right, because you owe that to everybody, is to work hard. But then, like, she couldn't sustain it. And so then we started running out of money again, running out of money. So then my mom now she was starting to get financially, so she had a checkbook. And so my understanding with a checkbook was like, check fraud, essentially, right? My mom, we didn't have any money to pay for food, so she go over to the mall, write a check, take the item back the next day, get the cash back, right? And then that's how we bought our food. And that's how we had to survive for a long time. I mean, I've been homeless on more than one occasion, all because of the fact that we just didn't have security, financial security. I didn't start to really even understand that it wasn't normal until I left home at 17. Finally, just to go to the Naval Academy or Naval Academy Prep School, and I started getting paid actual money. And I wasn't prepared for it at all. My first check, I blew like $1,100 on CDs, DVDs, a DVD player, none of the stuff I have today. I have the CDs right there, and we all know those are obsolete, right? I still have them, but I'm just saying, like, there's nothing useful of that money. No one taught me how to save. No one taught me how to make a budget. I had no bills at that point, right? I had no credit card debt. I had nothing. And here I am, this 17-year-old kid making, I think it was like $1,500, $1,600 a month at the time, with no obligations other than sending my mother money back home. And if someone would have just taught me how to save early, I'd be a millionaire by now. But the reality is just that $10,000 compounded over 20 years, right? And then adding in every year, I'd probably be a millionaire by now, but I'm not, because I blew a lot of that money. And so getting to those steps and really, I didn't even become really aware of what was going on until I had a coach from prep school who really cared about me, looked at me like I was his son, who realized I had some very bad habits with money, right? I'm this kid who grew up poor, and now I'm at the Naval Academy, which is an elite institution, and people aren't like me there, right? And so I'm seeing them go to McDonald's all the time. I'm seeing them go have fun on the weekends, and I'm this athlete there, and we're going through the airport, and they had these nice little kiosks with these beautiful women, and they're telling me, like, hey, you can get a credit card. And I'm 18. I'm like, oh, what's a credit card? And I signed up for 10 credit cards, right? All low balances, $200 to $500. And so I'm living off of credit cards, because my plebe year at the Naval Academy, freshman year, you're only getting paid $100 a month. Or sophomore year, you're getting $200 a month. So my sponsor parents called my coach and was like, hey, David's not, he's not handling his money right. And they knew I really listened to him. And he just so happens that I didn't know he was he worked for Primerica. He was an advisor for Primerica on the side, right? And so he came down and he put an allotment, right? He garnished my wages. And what he did was he made me live off of $50 a month. And he took the rest of the money and put it into a Roth IRA. And I couldn't touch it, right? And I didn't even have access to it. I couldn't log in and see it or anything like that. And it sucked. Oh my God, it sucked. It sucked terrible. I was angry. I was upset. But what he did was he forced me to budget. Now, when I graduated and I got closer to graduation, I started getting more money, and I started asking him, like, hey, what do I do with this money? Because he would send me statements. And I'm like, oh man, this is growing, right? Because I'm a math major. I'm like, oh, look at the interest rate. Oh, it's like, and then he taught me the rule of 72, and he taught me, he's the first person to introduce compound interest to me. And I started looking up, because I'm a math major, and I'm like, I understand these numbers, and I look like, oh wow, that's actually growing. Mm-hmm. So when I got my at the Naval Academy, you get what's called a career starter loan, and it was $30,000 loan at 0% interest. So I was like, well, if I could take $50 to $100 a month and put that in a Roth IRA, and it grows at this, like, what happens when I take 8,000? What happens when so I called him, was like, hey, can you invest this $8,000, $10,000 for me? And he did it. And I got out of the Naval Academy, and I got eventually got stationed out in San Antonio, Texas. And then I went to get an apartment, and come to find out my credit score is 520. And I could barely get an apartment. And I'm like, what the heck is a credit score? Things I had no clue about. I heard people talk about credit. I had no clue about. I knew I had credit cards, right? And then I committed another faux pas. I canceled all those credit cards because
yeah, you're like, hey, I got to fix this now, right?
Yeah, I got to fix this now. And I completely overreacted, canceled all those credit cards. So now I have no active credit, and I owe people money. So I paid that money off very fast, right? But then now I don't have any credit cards. So now I had to go reactivate a credit card, right? Because I was like, man, why is my credit score not going up? I paid all my debts, right? So then I go and I look up the components of a credit score. And I'm like, well, why didn't anyone tell me not to close these credit cards? Because the credit history matters, and the length of credit matters, and the overall utilization rate matters. Like, all I had to do was pay them off, and my credit score went up. So then now I'm 23, and I'm like, I got to do better, right? So then I'm living down in Texas, and I'm at my teammate's house, who took me in while I was in the Naval Academy, because, again, I was homeless. I had nowhere to go. And his dad was an accountant for an oil firm. And he was sitting down at the table, and he had a spreadsheet open. So I was like, oh, what are you doing, sir? And he was like, well, I'm working on our budget. I was like, what's a budget? So he sat me down and taught me how to create a budget, right? Here I am. I'm pretty good with computers. I'm a math guy. And I was like, oh, this is just Excel. Let me figure this out. So then I learned how to budget. First thing I did was go and track my expenses. It's like, oh, man, I need to figure this out. And then I had even more motivation, because I made the decision I was going to try and go to medical school. But in order to go to medical school, I needed to make sure I had money for applications, because it was expensive. So I had to save money. In order to figure out how to save money, I had to budget my money and actually know how to keep me on track to get to the number I needed. So then I'm still working through.
So David, when you go, I'm going to hop in. I know we're flying through the story, but I want to hit on a couple points here too. So I'm just interrupting you. It's cool. We'll get back to it. Which is, so, I do want to hear, because I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk a little bit about, I guess the role and the opportunity that sports brought through this to get you to the Navy. And then obviously you brought in your coach, and the importance there. So, you were playing basketball too, right? So how did that help bring some structure to everything, right? Because that was a big part of, your decisions through that time period too.
Yeah, so, I kind of glossed over it, right? So I played two sports in college, right? Because, at the end of the day, like, sometimes it's hard for people to really relate to that, right? So I played two sports in college. I ran track in Division I level, and I played basketball at Division I level. I sucked at all of it, right? I was an okay athlete, right? So it really provided a stepping stone for me, right? I knew basketball wasn't going to be my end goal. It never was supposed to be my end goal. It was supposed to be a way to get me out of poverty, meaning get me out of the situation that caused me so much pain and hurt, and get me away to finally allow me the opportunity to do something to better my life for my family. And I mean, I was a lot of teams I played on, I was always like regarded as a leader, team captain. And what basketball did, it taught me, and same thing with being an athlete, it taught me how to put the work in every day to get to a final goal, right? And the same thing. So like that work habits that my mother instilled in me, and then I honed by playing college sports, sort of helped me to learn how to keep the bigger picture in mind. Because one of the things that they don't teach you about early on is like in basketball, like you're supposed to be emotional, but you're not supposed to make emotional decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So like I play point guard and shooting guard, and one of my big things is like I knew the rules and I knew the game better than other players, right? So like I knew all the little tidbits about like when you can call a timeout, when the ball needs to. So I'm constantly like making these decisions in my head because I know the final goal is to win the game. And I know if I make this little tweak here that the other team doesn't know about, like that can help us out, right? Those little moves can help us out. And that translates over into my financial life too, right? Because I can stay focused even when I'm emotional. The big thing about money is everyone gets emotional. Same deal like I did when I reacted wrong and I paid off all my credit cards. Like it was a bad emotional response, right? But at the same time, like I can see the bigger picture. I know the goal is to win the game, right? Yeah. Whether it's the financial game, a game in sports. The sports provided me a mechanism to really hone my skills. And then life is like you have to constantly improve. So I was lucky enough to play basketball. I was lucky enough to run track, which they're completely different. And I had a lot of fun running track. I didn't realize that I would have that much fun. But like track is an individual team sport, right? So like the goal is to both win your event or get enough points, just like swimming, right? Mm-hmm. It's an individual team sport. You have to do your job to contribute to the overall team. Basketball is like that to a degree. But I mean, it's a lot easier for individuals to stand out, right? So like you got to be able to take pride in those things. And I translate a lot of those skills over into my financial life.
So the next thing too, right? You did I guess even with that, right? You ran into adversity in college with that being the main thing, the injuries, right? You suffered two big injuries through college. And so what was that like, kind of realizing that things were shifting for you in there too?
So backing up to high school. So my junior year in high school, I was doing really, really well basketball-wise, and then I shattered my wrist. I shattered it so bad that the doctor said that I wouldn't play basketball ever again. And my whole thing was proving people wrong. I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to play basketball and be better, and I'm going to make it to college. And I did, right? So that was the first major injury I had to deal with. And I missed half my junior year. I missed my majority of my junior season dealing with that injury. Then I missed half the year taking care of my mom, where I had to sort of hide like everything was okay, but I didn't go to school for an entire semester. So that was the first injury I dealt with. And mentally, it just messes with you, right? So like nothing's the same after you have that big of an injury. Like you have to come up with ways to sort of cope with it. Mm-hmm. And you have to get over the fear of playing again. And so you have to that mental hurdle takes a lot of energy and takes an emotional toll. And so then I show up to prep school and I just blew out the ligaments on the lateral side of my ankle. And I kept playing, right? I took a couple of weeks off, kept playing. And reality is like I showed up my freshman year at the academy and my ankle wasn't repaired. I wasn't healthy to start the season and I still played. And it was a very, very bad decision on my part. I was young and listening to the wrong people. In reality, I should have sat out, right? And so I'm starting off my career injured. So then I finally get my ankle. I have my ankle reconstructed. And instead of taking the whole, I think the original plan was to sit out 8 to 10 months following the surgery. I came back in, I think, 5 to 6 months, and I was ready for the season. Again, another bad decision. And I'm starting off, and I was always a high jumper, right? And, I was a good athlete, and I was always a big leaper. And it sort of hurt me, right? Because now I have to change my game for what I was used to playing. And so I was constantly trying to fight this uphill battle. And I finally got back to where I was before I hurt my ankle. And then next thing you know, another injury comes around where I have this major catastrophic injury to my hand where I tore the ligaments on the outside of my thumb, and then I dislocated 2 fingers with it. The finger dislocations weren't that bad, but the thumb is the thing that really hurt, right? And so I underwent one surgery to get the thumb repaired, and it failed, and I had to get my thumb fused. And it essentially ended my career. That's how I ended it, right? I started off on a bad note, and then I ended where I didn't even get a chance to play my senior season because of this injury I had. And it's a little devastating to that point, right? Like no one, like if you go and search on my basketball career, everyone asks me about those injuries, right? Because that's the thing that overshadowed. Like the reality is I was never healthy. I was asked to continue to play, and I did, and I should have. I wish in that situation I had parents who were watching out for me. I just didn't have any, right? And so I thought other people had my best interest in mind when they didn't.
Yeah, it's tough with that, right? And we've talked about it. I mean, had you had that guidance during there, right? You said parents watching out for you, putting health first, you actually could have had a better basketball career, but that's always that balance. And unfortunately, right, not everyone gets that opportunity. But you're here with us today, and where you got to with your other story too was, so we'll go back there, hopping back again, which is right, kind of going through the budgeting, the saving, but also tell us when did you decide that med school is the right thing? That's where I'm gonna go, and kind of that I think part of that's that promise you made about creating change for the next generation, right?
Yes. So it's funny because I didn't realize I was smart till 6 years ago, right? No one ever told me, right? I missed again, I grew up in an abnormal situation, and I missed a semester of school. I was out of school for a long time in elementary school because they lost my school records. And I showed up to Naval Academy, and I validated some chemistry courses, which was like unheard of. And I didn't think anything of it, right? Because I didn't pay attention to that. Only thing I had on my mind was playing sports. I was a basketball player. I didn't really even care about that. Like I'm notorious for rushing through the SAT while we were in prep school because we had to get on the road for a game. And I think I got like a 1,300 or something crazy back then. And I didn't even finish the test, right? Because I didn't really care about the test. All I cared about was playing basketball. And so I didn't realize I was smart. And I show up to this, I decided to take biology because I had taken biology before. And I was like, it'll be pretty cool. And I show up, and the professor's going around the room asking people their names, what do they want to do. And everyone's like, I want to go to medical school. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a dentist. I want to be this. And I'm sitting there looking around. I was just quiet. I was like, man, like, wow, they're all going to medical school. Like, is that something I'm supposed to be doing, right? Because it's an all new situation. I didn't know any of this stuff, right? I didn't know how to get to medical school. And I just knew what I liked to do and what was fun. And so I did that stuff, right? So then I show up in my advisor's office, who also happened to be like the pre-med coordinator at the Naval Academy. They don't have a pre-med program. And I show up and I ask him, I was like, hey, people are saying like, if you take biology, like they think you're going to medical school. He's like, can I go to medical school? And he was like, yeah, you absolutely can if you want to. And it just like blew my mind. So I was like, fine, I'm going to medical school, right? But even then, people didn't believe me. My nickname in college was Doc as a joke, right? They thought it was a joke that someone like me was going to get to become a doctor, right? And so I just, again, people thought I couldn't do it, so I went ahead and did it to prove them wrong, right? And that's not a great way to be, but it's how I got there, right? But I mean, I've always had these feelings like I got to help others. I just got to help someone. And a lot of it is born out of my childhood. Like, again, trauma. My mom, we're in Fallbrook, California, and it was a hot day. And we're at Fallbrook's right outside the old Naval Weapons Depot. And and it's sort of like a rural area in California. So walk out, and we're going to church that day, and my mom drops and has a seizure. And I'm crying, asking for help. And nobody comes. And after that, I'm like, you know what? I'm not asking for help. I'm just going to help. I got to figure this out. And so I just made a commitment, and I didn't know what it was going to look like, right? On just figuring out some way to help other people, right? Because I can't sit back and watch someone like how I was, like a kid how I was, be in that much pain, right? And so I made this commitment to a service to others, right? Because I like, we went through so much. Like, people shouldn't have to go through what I went through just to get to where I am today.
So here you are today, and tell us a little bit about what you're doing today, right? So you explained it a little bit, right? But I guess, at least on the medical side, then we'll talk about some of the financial interests and coding and other side that you've had. But yeah, so what do you really do now? You kind of explained it at the beginning down there in Guantanamo, but what's your day look like? And you're in the surgery world now too. So what is that? Yeah, just whatever you can tell us about that. I'd love to hear.
So I am a general and robotic surgeon. Like, robotics is my thing. For this year that I'm down here, I'm not doing any robotics because there's no robot here, right? Having a robot is like the luxury. And by robot, I mean the Intuitive, Da Vinci Xi or SI. I can use all of them. Because of my background in tech, like, robotics is just like intuitive to me. Like, not to use the word intuitive, but it's like innate for me to use it. Because I understand the underlying technology. But down here, I function as a deterrent, right? So if things are to go bad, you have someone who can stabilize. And so I function in an acute care scenario. So if you're coming in and you're sick, I help you get better, and then I get you somewhere where you can get definitive care. So it's more like the ballistic missile defense system. So I'm this ballistic missile waiting to fire here that might not ever fire. And it's a tough position to be in because you're responsible for so much, but it's also kind of cool in that aspect to know that when you've accomplished and you finished the assignment, that you could do it. That's the hardest thing, is really knowing that you could accomplish something that you never thought you could. Right? 10 years ago, I never thought I would be the surgeon for 6,000 people. I never thought I would be responsible for watching over that many people. And then now I'm here and I'm doing it, and I'm just putting one foot in front of the other every single day. So that on a daily basis, my work day looks a little different because I'm in Pandora's box. I don't know what's going to come in.
Yep. And you've got a family now too, so you're away from them, which is, I'm sure, tough. But so how are you managing with that too? And I mean, I know you've got some big goals coming up in the next couple of years, but how's that being deployed away? And obviously, a lot of people have experienced that, but I mean, how are you guys dealing with it?
It's tough because I mean, just a reality. I'm a 6'2", 220-pound African-American male, right? I look young, and obviously everyone can tell from the climate, right? My presence doesn't necessarily always lend to people to really want to open up all the time, right? Because I can be, and it's very unfortunate that some may feel like I'm threatening to them. My presence is threatening. So it's hard for me to connect to a lot of people. So there's a lot of isolation that occurs. It's never easy. It never gets easier. And it's something that you're constantly battling with. And over time, it actually gets a little worse because the higher up in rank I go, the harder it is for me to relate to people. And so I spend a lot of time sort of thinking about my mental health and reading, talking to you, right? Trying to stay connected to people and staying like on social media to really like have some attachment to the rest of the world while I'm away.
Yeah, and I mean that's a huge challenge for, and there's, jokes about it, but I mean it's a serious thing, right? Of people in the military staying connected to like civilian style life, right? Like, and when they come back and when they leave the military, also a huge adjustment, right? Like, how do you feel connected because you lived in essentially a different world, and then trying to pay back attention to, well, what does civilian life people do, right? And I know that's a tough challenge. And my best friend, and I've told you about him before, Marine, and he had some of those challenges too after a bunch of tours, right, coming back and trying to readjust to things. I think he's done a good job, but mental health is a big deal with all of that. So stay connected to all of us, and love talking to you and spending time with you. From your you've kind of become unique in the sense also that you have these visions of the finance world now that you also want to be part of, right? Like, you have the doctor piece, and then you learned how all the investing, the saving, the financial world's really important. You've grown this interest, you started blogging, you write on it, right? And you've built calculators on this, so a whole bunch of resources. And so what are you looking to, and I know that there's not a simple answer here, but when you look at that side, what are some of the things you want to accomplish in the financial space moving forward too?
Well, that is born out of, and, I talked about this, I touched on it just a little bit, right? So like when I left the Naval Academy, my coach was no longer working at Primerica, and I had this Primerica account. So I called trying to get advice because here I am, I'm this guy with an applied mathematics degree, and I'm noticing like, hey, my account's not growing anymore. Why isn't it growing? And I called to get another financial advisor, and they told me that I didn't have enough money. And I didn't have enough money to really dictate me talking to someone. And I was like, that's kind of messed up, man. I need advice too. And so I had to learn these things on my own. And then the more layers that I peel back, and I'm like, this is basic information that everyone should have. And so I started teaching myself like, hey, this is what interest rates are. These are the bond market. This is the stock market. These are index funds. And I go through the same, and everyone takes the same progression, right? Everyone starts with the same books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I know the author is very controversial, and I wholly believe he's controversial, but the book and the parable is good, right? Because it's not a true story. And then it's hard to be something when you've never seen an example of it. And I've always heard the name Warren Buffett. So I Googled Warren Buffett one day, and I came across The Intelligent Investor, which is one of my favorite books. But the book is very technical, right? And the average person is not going to get the nuances and the information in there, and it's dated, right? So I just kept working through that. And my goal ultimately is to help bring financial literacy to the masses, where if you want to use a financial advisor, use one. But if you can't afford it, you also get the same information, right? Because the people who need a financial advisor are not the people with money. It's the people who don't have money who need the financial advisor, who need to understand how to stop living paycheck to paycheck, right? Who need to understand, like when I was a kid, I used to have friends get beat up and jumped and die over Jordan sneakers. If you were living in the hood and in poverty, like there's no reason to buy Jordan sneakers. It's a social symbol, right? I couldn't afford them anyway. I mean, we bought off Payless in the clearance rack at Big Five, right? Because I have big feet, and that's the only place you can find at 13 and 14, right? But my family would have never been able to support that, right? But if you think about it, if you buy a $20 pair of shoes or $30, $50 pair of shoes, the function of it's going to remain the same. If you work hard, you can probably find a pair that you won't get laughed at too much, right? But then the other 150 could be saved and put up for an emergency fund. I didn't know what an emergency fund for the longest time was. I only figured it out when I was like, man, this kind of sucks having these one-off expenses that come up and I don't have any money prepared for them. So I was like, Okay, I need to put some money up for emergencies. Ding, ding, ding. That's called an emergency fund, right? And my goal is just to make financial information available, right? If and really that benefits everybody. If as a financial advisor, I understand it's a business, right? And for your business model, it doesn't make sense for you to be able to provide financial advice because you have to get paid for your time and they can't afford it. Well, guess what? Help grow those folks' wealth to the point where they can now become a paying customer for you, right? Because everyone, if you can increase the market size, you can increase your revenue. And so a lot of people don't see it that way because they just want to go after the Henrys, the high earners, not rich yet people, the like folks who are physicians and lawyers. But the reality is like these folks, they need the financial information too, because they go from making nothing to getting a 200, 300% increase in their salary, and they have no clue how to handle it. They are not equipped for it. Law school doesn't equip you. Dental school doesn't equip you. Medical school doesn't equip you. They're like, poverty doesn't have a color, right? And financial illiteracy doesn't have a color. It is across the board and is a full spectrum. And the thing is there's not a lot of people who really want to pay attention to it because they don't make money off of it.
Yeah, don't make money off of it, so don't pay attention, don't service it. And so that's a good lead into, you know, I said we would get to this, but something that you, myself, and Tyrone, kind of one of the reasons we really started coming together more regularly. Yeah, I'll let you kind of tell us a little bit about it. You know, as our robotics, coder, right, been working on our website. So if people don't like the website too, you can obviously
they can blame me.
They can blame the good doctor here. But right, we came together as a core and said, hey, let's start something in the different areas that we all kind of have a tie to. So you just hit one of the big ones, which is all these individuals coming out of places like med school. And I know you hate that too, right? But it's a little bit true, which is like the jokes about, right, doctors knowing nothing about business, nothing about finance, and making a lot of the wrong decisions early on, right? So, that's one area, financial literacy, Tyrone's really involved on in the younger ages. And then we're talking about removing some barriers for, Black professionals to kind of enter this world and learn more about it through the CFP review. So, but tell us, you came up with the name, I believe, right, of the originally. So tell us a little bit about where the EE Evolve came from.
So this was born out of a tweet from Tyrone, right? We know Tyrone's like big name, super. He's a marketing savant, right? He has a big social media presence and just an overall awesome person, right? And he's very passionate about things. But his 3 E's, and I was just like, you got to educate, you got to empower, right? And you got to expose people and endow them, right? The big 3 E's. And I was like, man, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? And I was like, society needs to evolve. And I'm like, that works, right? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to evolve society into a better model, right, for financial literacy. And it's important. It's extremely important because at the end of the day, right, economic advancement lifts people out of poverty. If you want to, and this just goes back to the Bible, if you teach a man or woman, right, to fish, they can eat for a lifetime, right? You give them a fish, they're going to eat for that meal, but teach them to fish, right? So if you really want to advance our economy, advance our society, give people the tools that they need to do better. Give them the tools to create the life that they need to create, right? We all hear about the pro athletes who go broke, right? Because they don't understand the true implications of getting $1 million sign-on bonus in a high state like California, a high tax state like California, or the fact that their bonus structure might come with a certain fee structure, which is a percentage to their agent or percentage to their business manager, and they don't understand what their true like money in their pocket because they go spend everything before they've had it, right? And it takes them too long to figure these things out. And so the Michael Vicks and all these people that you've heard about, right? That shouldn't happen. And a large part of the population that it's really, or the demographic that it's associated with, are Black athletes or are Black people, right? And that's why I hate that connotation that doctors don't manage money well or don't understand business. And then there's the connotation in the physician world where, well, I'll just go get an MBA to learn how to really manage business and do finance. Well, ding, 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 you know this better than me. An MBA doesn't teach you crap about managing finances, right? It doesn't really teach you anything about business. It teaches you case studies that you theoretically learn some stuff, but this is all real life experience that you have to get, right? And I think we can sort of lessen that learning curve on financial literacy if we really just start putting content out there, putting programs out there. I know you and I talked about, there really needs to be the financial advising in some regards is looked at as almost like a salesmanship, right? And if it's going to become a profession, then there has to be some type of giving back and a pro bono, right? That your compensation can't be tied directly to a product that you're pushing, right? So like for me, I treat people as a physician, my skills, my goal is just to make sure you are healthy, okay? I have nothing to do with the compensation. I don't control that. That's a completely different industry, and that's on the hospital or my business manager or whatever practice setting I'm in to figure out what the payment is. So I have this altruism effect in that, right? And I get it. Financial advising is a business and they got to make money. But like at the same time, if you want physicians to be better with their money, teach them how to be better with their money. And the 80% solutions like, oh, well, decrease your expenses and put your money in a Roth IRA and that's fine for 80% of individuals, but there are going to be people like me who start off way behind the 8 ball, right? So if you're going from sort of social economic status where you're at the bottom and all of a sudden you make it to the top 3% like I am right now, well, who equipped me for that rocket ride, right? I had to equip myself. I had a little bit of a start because guess what? I was lucky enough to have a coach who cared about me and who happened to be a financial advisor who taught me about compound interest and the rule of 72. And then I went from there. I had to keep learning, right? I had to keep learning. And I think the biggest thing with Evolve is just making sure that we can get people in the right positions and get them an opportunity to succeed. Because we all know, like, who and you have a great story about student loans, but like how well do you think, and if I didn't have the military pay for some of my stuff and I came out with some of my classmates student debt of $500,000, right? That is stressful, right? $500,000, I don't care what percentage the interest rate is. And some folks got 8-10%, right? That is compounding over, like, you might not pay the interest off for 20 years if you're paying minimum payments. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, the student loan stuff, and I've got a good story now. It turned out well, but I mean, I remember those times, when I shifted and took a much lower paying job, and I remember thinking like, and I had to go to income-based payments that year because I couldn't at $200,000 on that salary, like make regular payments, right? Like I wouldn't have been able to do it. It would have been more than my paychecks. And, that was super stressful because you're going to spend a year where you literally just watch the balance go up, right? And there's nothing you can do about it. And, that's a really tough place to be in. And especially if you don't necessarily see how you're going to get yourself out of that. I had a long enough view where I could see like, how do I progress in a career and get out of this, right? But for some people, they don't always see that pathway, or vision long-term enough, right? It's too day to day. And that's a huge challenge. And you brought up the stuff about the industry moving to profession. I mean, there's a bunch of pieces I wax on about that and lecture on. And but I think that the one, and I was glad that we finally saw the piece where some leaders came together on it. And I'm probably going to start getting more vocal on that too, which is we've got to see financial advisors, insurance agents, salesmen, the whole industry start to do more pro bono work. Like we have to see that. And it's weird because the CPA world does a lot more. The legal world does a lot more. Honestly, right? The medical world does a lot more. The financial world doesn't do that much. Like there's not a whole lot of it being done today. And to a large extent, it's actually the easiest of the three to help out, right? Like just go run a literacy program somewhere. Like that is the pro bono work that we need today. It's kind of amazing that the easiest one out of all of those is not doing it. So, but we haven't had a big call for it. Like I can't remember besides this year anybody coming out and saying like, hey, profession, you have to do this. So I think, a lot of the work that you're going to do, and Tyrone and myself, I think we're going to help move that forward. So I'm excited about it. I mean, I guess that's the good thing is there is a place to improve here.
Well, yeah, I just think it has to be done, right? I mean, if you think about it, like in the medical world, we have medical missions, right? But like, there's a lot of infrastructure that's needed. You got to get all these like countries to sign off on it. You have to get licenses. You have to do insurance. You have to do like, there's all these little things to set up clinics in other countries, right? Or even just to do a free clinic in the United States, someone has to pay for it. To set up a financial literacy clinic, right? It's literally you, a table. Even if you don't even have a table, it's literally the stuff in your brain, right? Be willing to give up your time and your brain to explain to people, hey, you do not want to take this high interest rate loan. Instead, you want to call your student loan provider or whoever, right, and negotiate a payment schedule. Because half the people don't even realize that they can negotiate a bill once the debt is there, right? Or, hey, your credit is being put into the ground because guess what? You had a missed payment 3 years ago and it's still affecting your score, but you paid on time the rest of the time. Just call your bank and ask them to remove it, right? People don't understand it. And so what they end up doing, they pay for these credit repair services, which I think are complete fraud, right? There's no such thing as true credit repair. It is you understanding what your credit score is, what's causing it, the problem, and then you disputing that cause, right? Or knowing little things like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, right, to really tell somebody, hey, you can, there's 3 credit bureaus and you can request your score every year. Hey, do you have any goals coming up? Okay. Are you planning anything? Okay. I'm planning a vacation and I need $2,000. Okay. How long? When is the vacation? When do you want to take it? Well, I want to take the vacation in 1.5 years. Okay. Bam. This is what we're going to do. We're going to set this account up and we're going to put away $50 to $100 a month so you can take in a vacation 1.5 years from now, the vacation you really, really want. Are you okay with that? Oh, I'm perfect. I didn't think I could do that. Look, it's great. And you're going to get a little bit of interest if you put it in a high yield savings account, which actually works out. Well, guess what? This money market actually might work out a little bit better for you. Like, there's no equipment needed for that. It's literally just you showing up. You can go to a library. You can go to a meetup. Like, literally, it's just you. You can even do it over Zoom at this point on Facebook, or you can do it on the Instagram. It's just you giving out free information. That's all it is. Being willing to interact with people who aren't paying you.
Yeah. First of all, just thank you for your passion there. And, I hope somebody hears this, more than one person, but at least one person listen to this and just feel driven to do something there. So, that's how I feel after listening to that. I'm like, hey, let's get moving. Let's get stuff going again. Evolve, right? Yeah. Closing off here, I know time-wise, I want to be cognizant of that. So last thing is always look, where's the best place to kind of follow and connect with you? So I know Twitter is very heavy on, and then probably drop a couple websites in here too.
So I am on Twitter. It's and I have a professional account. I don't really interact on that one too often because I get more enjoyment of talking to folks via my blog's Twitter account. It's actually at FiSurgi, FiSurgi. Funny story behind that. My blog is named SurgiFi, www.surgifi.com. And I thought that was going to be a okay handle, but there's some random person who's had that handle on Twitter for the last 12 years at least. So I can't get it, which is fine. So I'm under FiSurgi, but I interact with literally everyone there, and I will respond, and I get notifications, and I try and put out as much free information as possible. My blog, I usually put out an article once every 2 weeks, and there's no ads, right? It's just free information. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I don't sign you up for any newsletters. I do have an advertisement or ad or a little pop-up that says, hey, put your email in. And I give out a free budget planner, right? And you just download it and it goes right to you. But the reality is like in those emails are going to be contacts that once we built all these free financial products, and you can just go and grab them. And so we know how to contact you, and all this stuff is building up. My goal eventually one day is that I can build enough of an infrastructure where we can help someone go from homeless to making 100K within 2 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that too, right? That's going to be exciting when you're able to do that, take somebody that whole journey and truly change multiple generations of lives with that. And we'll be there soon. And then I think for other people, right, also check out some of the stuff we're doing on evolve.org, right? We've got multiple, but it's one of the ones. It'll get you there. So
yeah, it'll get you there. So 3 E's and then 2 E's and evolve.org. We should be up and running hopefully by Monday. I got to do some ad copy and then we'll get there.
Yeah. Well, by the time people are watching this, it'll be up. So, we're almost right there. So
we're almost there.
Yeah, we're excited. So check it out. It'll be up with the time you're listening to this. And so, Doc, as people called you before, and you made it, you're there, you are the doctor now. Thanks so much for, I really appreciate you taking time to hop on here with me today and come on the Framework Show. I know you've been listening to people, I wouldn't say religiously, but pretty regularly here, and and I know we've got a couple people you've been excited to listen to. So I really appreciate you taking time to hop on here with me too, share your story. I know that's deeply personal, and so I always feel grateful of your time, our friendship, and coming on here today.
I appreciate you guys for having me. I really enjoyed it. Like you said, I listen to your podcast every week. And as you know, I immediately provide feedback for all of them. I try and make sure that I support you and Tyrone. And there's another guy, Tyler Olson, who's an advisor. I try to make sure I listen to his podcast. And then I just started listening to Barry Ritholtz's podcast, which is very good too. I should probably listen to more medical podcasts, but I love finance.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll keep you in our world for the time being. So, yeah, and well, thank you again, your service, your time, all of that. And thank you, everyone, this week for listening to the Framework Podcast.